Hola y bienvenidos fans de LevillaGames, soy Leviato y estamos aquí en Bravely Default. Continuando donde lo dejamos, episodio 32. En este episodio vamos a hacer el castillo de Lord de Rosso. Permitidme deciros que por desgracia el PC se me ha apagado, pues se me ha ido la luz en la casa entera, así que esto ya lo he hecho, ¿vale? Esto ya lo he hecho, pero he tirado para atrás porque se ha perdido el vídeo. Así que... repetimos, es un par de cuadros con lore. Hay mucho lore en esta parte del juego. Así que voy a prestar atención.
Lester, eldest son of the House of De Rosso, future clergyman of the Crystal Adventists and cardinal of the Crystal Orthodoxy, born in the land of Eternia on a cold winter's day. So, that's his mother, not his beautiful young wife. And that little baby is Lord De Rosso.
¿Hijo de quién?
Clergyman? Of the Crystal Adventists?
Is something the matter, Agnes?
The Crystal Adventists were the predecessors of the Crystal Orthodoxy. It is now known as the Old Faith, but it hasn't been practiced in over 2,400 years. How could he have been a member of the Adventist clergy? According to this portrait, Lord De Rosso is incredibly
como el abuelo. Que esto ya lo sabemos. Es que esto en teoría tendría que haberlo hecho en el otro mundo.
For I was born of these frozen lands in a time some 2,400 years from this day.
Pero como lo hice después de haber viajado a otro mundo.
And this portrait?
I was but an infant, as you can see. This is a reproduction, however. The original was lost long ago to fire.
And what of the part that reads, clergyman of the Crystal Adventists and cardinal of the Crystal Orthodoxy?
Yes. As Wind Vestal, you would be expected to take interest in such matters. But ere I delve into the matter of the Old Faith and the Orthodoxy, allow me to tell of the founding of this land. As you may well know, this land had long been ruled by the Crystal Orthodoxy. However, 15 years passed, the Templar rose up and occupied their lands. Thus was the Duchy of Eternia born. Or so I expect you have been taught. However, the Templar did not found a new state. In truth, he restored an ancient dynasty.
He did?
Long before the Crystal Orthodoxy ruled this land, it was known as the Kingdom of Eternia. In a time 2,400 years past, Eternia was a bountiful land blessed with 4 distinct seasons. The highlands were not as lofty as they are today. People and ideas flowed freely from other lands. The kings of Eternia were protectors of the Earth Crystal and the Crystal Adventists, ruling in peace for generations. To the west lay the castle of the House
Espero
of
que no se vuelva a ir la luz, por
hereditary
favor.
Dukes of Eternia with royal
Me haría mucho daño.
veins.
Llevaba media hora de
Relations
episodio,
with the royal
¿sabes?
family were good, and ever did the kings of Eternia treat the dukes of our house with kindness. In return, the House of De Rosso did faithfully serve generations of Eternian kings.
Guay. Anillo seguro. Ah, ya lo tendré. Vale, entonces no será interesante. Vale, vamos a ver lo que hay allí. No. Pa, 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 para, pa. No, espera. Ahí. Primero un hielo. Luego... Ah, espera, no se está viendo esto. Vale. Luego un hielo. Luego Aspir y luego Aspir. Ah, no, y ella que haga lo suyo. ¿Qué es esto de aquí? Uno por ahí, otro por ahí. Ay, qué poca vida tenías, ¿verdad? Dice estaba en la F. La F como expresión, y eso es algo que me ha dolido hasta a mí decir, pido perdón. Nah, se les revienta, se les revienta. ¡Oh! Ah, vale, ahora sí. No he hecho la cólera. Claro, supongo porque estaría a 1 de vida. Y tiraría por atacar. Joder. Cómete esa, Sucubo. Yo creo que esto estaba hecho. Entiendo que todo el lore que te cuentan ya está hecho, porque esto lo tendrías que haber hecho antes de viajar a otro mundo. Pero estaba muy poco leveleado para aquel entonces. Era muy flojicho. Ahí, ahí. Subid, subid. No voy a sustituir el guardado por si me toca volver a recargar. Uy, se va la luz. Espero que no se vaya la luz, la verdad. Francamente. Algo que suelo esperar. Ah, vale, primero será por aquí. ¡Ah! Cinturón negro. Esto aumentaba la posibilidad de crítico. Tidia tiene uno y no hace falta que Dea tenga otro. Si supiera que el escalado del daño sagrado del guardián, del paladín, del templario, depende de mente o algo así.
It is a portrait of my ordainment as Cardinal of the Orthodoxy. I was as yet... No, let us move on to other matters. I was born of the House of De Rosso, hereditary Dukes of Eternia. Blessed was my youth. My parents showered affection upon me, and I was beloved by the people. And the king bestowed favor upon me as well. Upon royal recommendation, I was made a cleric of the Crystal Adventists, the Old Faith, in my 19th year. I devoted my body and soul to my clerical duties, for king, for kingdom, for faith. Sleep became an oft-missed luxury. But before long, a new tide began sweeping through the Crystal Adventists. There were those who wanted the clergy to control the 4 crystals of Luxemdark, rather than local monarchies and temples. That belief formed the core of the Crystal Orthodoxy. The Eternian royal family, keepers of the Earth Crystal, immediately assented to this new way.
No me jodas que todo este tiempo tenía el micro apagado.
No,
¿verdad? Voy a fingir que no. Pero no sé si lo he apagado yo porque he empezado a hablar de Rosso o... Se me ha ido la cabeza, tío. Espero que no. Pero si no, por si acaso, hola y bienvenido a fan de LevillaGames. Pa'lante. Me da igual todo.
Amid the conclave's maelstrom, I was approached by a cardinal who wished for me to vote for his choice. I suppose it was my youth and sincerity that made me reject the notion out of hand. But that was my downfall, for I was forced from the position of cardinal by the fraudulently elected Grand Patriarch. I had been but fervent in my beliefs and ideals. What I did only for the Orthodoxy, and for the people of this world.
The old faith and the Orthodoxy. The Kingdom of Eternia and the Duchy. That was all a bit hard to follow.
I agree. There are no major differences in teachings between the Old Faith and Orthodoxy. They both revere the four crystals. I have heard that the Adventists gave way to the new and truer ideas of the Orthodoxy and faded away.
No wonder the old faith was abandoned.
Yet there is more to the story, for history is not more than accounts recorded by the victorious. To solidify their power, the victors showered contempt upon the vanquished. So it was those who held the reins of power within the Orthodoxy relentlessly pressed for the Adventists' eradication. No one recalls the words of the vanquished if the victorious write them out of history. 'Tis as if they had never existed.
I'd been taught that the battle between the two faiths had been fierce, and in its wake, devastation persisting to this day covered all the lands.
That is an uncharacteristically accurate account for the Orthodoxy, save for their false reckoning of time. It was after the Orthodoxy had begun ruling the world that the endless conflict with the Adventists began. I should know, for I was there to bear witness first.
Bear witness.
Lord DeRosso, how could you possibly be that old?
Y no hay respuesta. No lo dirá. Que hizo algún pacto con un vampiro o algo así. El discurso épico de Lord DeRosso. Reina Bell, estuviste como un tronco durante todo el discurso de Lord DeRosso. ¿Cómo? ¿Un tronco? Quiere decir que estabas durmiendo. Ah, ¿tanto se me notaba? ¿Notarse? Roncabas como un oso. ¿En serio? Lo siento mucho. Hasta yo sé que es de muy mala educación. Eso es. Aunque yo soy un discurso realmente largo. Cierto, Reina Bell. Muy mal educado. Roncabas tan alto que incluso me has despertado. ¿Qué? ¿Tú también estabas durmiendo, Edea? Ay. Bien hecho, parejita. ¡Ah! Ah, menos mal. Menos mal. Alma de Tamasa. Esto era... Esto creo que ya lo he cogido. Esto era lo que me da mucha mente, ¿verdad? Hay mucha inteligencia. Vale. Me interesa. Pierdo muchos puntos de mana, 100 y pico, pero me interesa tener mucha mente. Tanto que son como 30 de puntos de mente. Es una barbaridad. ¡Toma! Madre mía. ¿Para qué hay nadie más que no sea Tiz luchando? Que luches solamente Tiz. Y Annie es para curarle. Ah, no he hecho ahí la movida, ¿por qué? No, he hecho ahí su ataque de oscuridad y tenía no tenía la vida... o sea, y tenía la vida a tope.
This one shows a castle in flames.
A large army surrounds it. It looks as if it could fall at any moment. Is this not this very castle? See, this is the western corridor right here.
There's another castle burning in the distance. It's near where Eternian's central command is today.
So then, that's the Orthodoxy's head temple in flames?
Nay, the distant castle in flames belonged to the King of Eternia, and the castle in the Four. 'Tis the abode of my family, the House of DeRosso.
But why? Why would such a terrible thing?
The Kingdom of Eternia was suddenly beset by a great host from another land. We would later come to know that it was a four-state coalition sent by order of the Crystal Orthodoxy. They had been told the King of Eternia sought a return to Adventism and was arming for war against the Orthodoxy. The Grand Patriarchy used this fiction to order a great muster of forces from across the lands. Alas, I failed to heed the many warning signs. I rejected the scheming Cardinal's choice for Grand Patriarch. But he succeeded in luring votes from other factions, and his became the ruling faction of the Grand Patriarchy. It was they who wished to establish Crystal Orthodoxy as the uncontested world religion. Under their orders, the castle of the Eternian King was besieged. It fell in mere weeks. Before long, the great host was at the gates of our castle, and my father lay brutally murdered. The water supply was poisoned.
La historia de Black
Orthodoxy's
Tepes.
forces drew an ironclad ring around the castle. By then, the castle sheltered not but the elderly, the young, the wounded. There was no hope of resistance. I was forced to sue for peace, even offering my own mother as hostage per their demands. Yet that failed to break the siege. The commoners who had placed their faith in my family and me slowly starved to death. It was then that a letter arrived from a man. That man was the Cardinal, who had sought to influence my vote. The Fiend was now the officer in charge of the attack. He wrote that he would not accept my surrender. Such was the hatred he bore for me. Such hatred that he was willing to let countless innocents die. My mother had been murdered. Our castle was consumed in flames. That is the painting you see here.
How could the Orthodoxy do such a thing? This all reminds me of what happened during the Great Plague.
Indeed. Perhaps the Templar and I are not so very different. To be betrayed by what you believe in. To have your family and those you protect murdered. Though we do not see eye to eye, perhaps it is a shared sorrow that binds us.
F. Ay. Espero que no queden muchos pisos. Y que no se vaya la luz. Pero bueno. A tu casa. Ay. Pa-pam. Ya son ganas de gastar PM, también te digo. Pero bueno, tengo turboéteres infinitos, como quien dice. Guantes de enano. Creo que esto ya lo tengo. Madre mía, los criticazos. ¿Sephiroth?
Look! Such fierce flames.
Though I wish not to remember that day. It is indelibly etched upon my mind.
Ah, fuego.
How did you survive?
The Orthodoxy lay siege yet would accept no surrender. My mother, father, relatives, and my people lay dead. It was then I set our castle ablaze. But as the flames began to lick my body, something slipped into me. Betrayed by the precepts I believed in, was I not bitter? Robbed of my beloved homeland, my dearest of kin, my people, slain. Amid such despair, was I content to simply welcome death? Nay, I heard a voice. Accept me, and I shall grant life everlasting. Though it shall be filled with grief, thou shalt have all eternity to wreak vengeance upon thine enemies. Did I forge a dark pact with some fiendish entity that day? Or was it a rebirth
Warlock.
triggered by a future me reaching back to the past? Panicked upon failing to find my body, the Orthodoxy chose to denounce my family and me as ghoulish vampires. Thus have I been living in a mortal existence ever since.
And the name Vampire Castle is...
A lie that has been perpetrated
Como
by the
yo.
Orthodoxy for some 2,400 years. Though it is true I am immortal, I am no vampire. I find the smell of blood too revolting to ever drink it. Having said that, I have done naught to quell the rumors. In truth, I endeavored to
Llevas una
embellish
puta
them.
capa de vampiro.
My
Claramente lo has
ability to
engalanado.
transform myself into a bat and grow these fangs are the fruits of many years.
Ah, qué guay.
Long, long years of effort. Tell me, O Vestal of the Wind, what does the Crystal Orthodoxy have to say about the passing of the first Grand Patriarch?
He chose the second Grand Patriarch and prayed for peace and the well-being of the faithful as he passed peacefully from this world.
Passed peacefully from this world, you say? I know the truth to be far different.
What do you mean?
The first Grand Patriarch was assassinated, along with his Archbishop, the man who had been my bane. The assassin himself tells you this. There is no other truth. That was when I forsook this land. Soon after, sightings of the vampire Lester de Rosso began to crop up throughout the world. I became a veritable Duke of Darkness, forging ties with those bearing hatred toward the Orthodoxy, and those it had oppressed. I was the enemy of man, the hated and feared vampire. But more than that, I was known as the arch-enemy of the Orthodoxy. And after some 500 years,
Hostia.
a fateful encounter with one whom you all know well. No. Let us leave the matter for another time.
Perfecto. ¿Alguien le ha dicho a De Rosso que tiene su castillo lleno de murciélagos y de enemigos? ¡Ah! Se murió. Ah. Vale. ¡Ay, no! Bueno, vale. Madre mía, Anya sin PM, ¿eh? ¿Quién lo iba a decir? Hiperbrazales. Me huelo cuál va a ser el rollo. Mucho el ataque. Dale. Que vayan para ella porque ella es la que va a estar... Hostia, ya me he quedado sin casi. Para. No. Oh. ¿Se considera que es un demonio el Lord de Rosso? Pero bueno. Madre del amor hermoso. Seré hija puta. Caguen. No, bueno. Maldito sea Rinabel. Vale. Hostia, mis turboéteres. Pensaba que tenía más. Tengo que comprar movidas. Que total da igual porque tengo dinero infinito. Pero eso. A ver que tengo 99 de algo me pone nervioso. ¿Estamos ya? ¿Aún no? ¿Cuánto castillo y cuánto lore de Rosso queda? Ay, no, mierda. Aquí esto es todo esto. Aquí Anies tira el piro, no tira el... Será por aquí. Ahí. Anies que era maga blanca, ¿no? Sí. Para optimizar. Como total la clase ya te la quedas un poco por la pasiva. Tira de la mía, creo que esto ya lo tengo. Muy probable. Sí, ahora lo embrujo. Me gusta lo que tengo. Madre mía. Los bichos estos quitan un montón, ¿eh? Daño hacen. Pasa que me libro porque fíjate tú, pero daño hacen. Ay, ¿a qué va a haber aquí un cofre? La madre que me parió. Paso. ¡Ah! Tengo más de esto. Paso de ir a volar el cofre. Muy está lejos.
Battlefield landscape?
It represents the long and hard-fought war between the Orthodoxy and we denizens of darkness.
Tienes cuadros muy raros, amigo.
500 years, my thirst for vengeance remained unsated. It had also been 500 years since the Orthodoxy had been founded. The world was in the midst of an age of seafaring and piracy. Compared to the great exchange of ideas and information, the once hallowed Orthodoxy began to lose its luster. The authority of the Grand Patriarch and the Orthodoxy itself began to wane. Fearing irrelevancy, the Grand Patriarchy acted rashly to regain its authority. This led to the unusual decision to select a commoner, the gifted young Yuliana, for an important task.
Yuliana? Sage Yuliana?
Yes, indeed. At age 20, the young Yuliana became High Inquisitor of the Crystal Orthodoxy.
It's hard to believe he ever was young.
It was no laughing matter, for there was no one more skilled at rooting out enemies of the faith than he. The shadowy ones, those who had been working against the Orthodoxy, were crushed by the host he led. In the several decades that saw him age, I cannot count the number of times we have crossed swords, he and I. In the great battle waged on the Karka Plain, the might of our clashing forces rent the very earth into a vast rift.
You mean the rift under Eisen Bridge?
In the battle at the foot of Mount Fragmentum, our armies smoked the mountain to its very roots.
So that's how that ravine was created.
And in the battle fought on the Harina Plain, the once fertile earth was reduced to desolation. The loss of that fertile plain is believed to have ushered in the downfall of the Harina dynasty.
To think any sort of battle could change the face of the earth so.
We fought our final battle 1800 years ago on the Norende Heights in the land of Count Isla.
The Norende Heights? That's where the Great Chasm opened up!
In the end, Yuliana, High Inquisitor of the Crystal Orthodoxy, utterly defeated me, Lord De Rosso, leader of the Shadows.
You were defeated? But you're here with us today!
Yes, well, there was more to that final battle than meets the eye. You see, I ceded the glory of victory to young Yuliana that day. I say young in my reckoning, for he was already 100 then. Yuliana returned triumphantly to Eternia with what he claimed to be my remains. What he brought them was not human. And when the Templar attacked the head temple 15 years past, it is said they found my tomb deep underground. Ever dreading the darkness and my return, the Orthodoxy kept those duplicitous remains under arcane seal for over 1,000 years. 'Tis a tale replete with irony, is it not?
Mucho me está costando llegar a partirte el morro, Dios, me va a perseguir eternamente ese huequecito, ¡No! Por favor, 5 pisos ya. Deberías activar los combates y ayudar por culo, Uy, ¿por qué ha atacado ella? A veces no hace lo que toca. Omni Elixir. Bien. Está un montón el fuego este, en realidad. Pa. Espera. Ahí. Estábamos empupitados. ¡Fumo! A la siguiente vuelves. Listo. Le digo al murciélago. ¡Ah! ¡Aún hay más cuadros! Lord de Rosso tiene usted un montón de cuadros de un paisaje en llamas. Pero un montón, ¿eh? Si comparamos, tiene usted un montón.
That is Say Juliana.
Pero eso no fue 500 años después.
Yes, indeed. No one would mistake such a man for young now. Having put down the blood-sucking Lord de Rosso, bane of the Crystal Orthodoxy, he became the first ever commoner to become an archbishop. Perhaps it was a small honor they threw his way, for he was already 101 years old and would not long count among the living.
That makes it sound despicable.
Agreed. The truth is, however, that was when Juliana's plot was at its most clever.
The sage's plot? What was he plotting?
He was taking measures to separate you Vestals and the faithful among the people from the Orthodoxy's corruption. After serving some 80 years, he had witnessed firsthand how corrupt the institution had become. Should nothing be done, it would not be long before the putrid poison would do harm to the most innocent of the faith. So it was he vowed to rid the Orthodoxy of the source of this poison, the concentration of power.
But how?
For the great feat of defeating me, Juliana had been made Archbishop, but in name only. But such was not key to his plot. Timing was the key. The proper time to separate the Vestals and the faithful from the Orthodoxy.
And just what timing would that be?
The great upthrust of the Eternian Highlands. At the time, the Highlands were not so formidable as they are today. But a colossal movement of earth and rock thrust the Highlands to lofty heights, thereby isolating Eternia from the world.
Hold on a moment. He was waiting for the Earth to move? How could he have known when such an event would take place?
I shall tell you in time. For now I will say this. Juliana bided his time till the Orthodoxy was cut off from the world. And at last, it happened. The Highlands ringing Eternia did thrust up to about half its height today. The Orthodoxy-ruled Eternia now found itself completely isolated, for this was an age preceding the airship. And while the Earth Crystal remained in their keep, control of the crystals of fire, water, and wind was returned.
Algo me dice,
to
vamos a
their
llegar al final y
respective
no nos vamos a pegar contra este hombre.
This,
Nos soltará la
what
chaparra,
you believe to be the true form
nos
of
dará el traje de
crystalism
vampiro y ya
is
casa.
the
El traje del
fruit
trabajo,
of
ya casa.
Juliana's efforts.
Porque es bueno, claramente, no es un
That
villano.
was the sage's doing? I won't ever call him a miserable old lech again.
No, hay que llamar. No, a ver, una cosa no quita la otra. Haya salvado, haya devuelto, la que te quito, es un viejo baboso, quiero decir. Una cosa no quita la otra. Separar obra del autor. ¡Vamos! Por Dios. ¡Ah! ¿Qué hay allí? Ah, es él. Va a venir. Va a trasladarse hasta aquí para darnos
What is
chapa
that
el lore,
glowing jewel-like object? I could swear I've seen something like that before.
¿Un asterisco? De trabajo.
I believe you have seen a similar sight countless times.
Ah.
It is known as an asterisk.
¿Vas a decirme lo que es? No sabemos lo que es.
An asterisk? As in those objects we possess?
Yes, indeed. The second stage in Juliana's plot against the Orthodoxy's authority was to deprive them of the power to grant vocations.
Grant vocations? I'm afraid I don't follow.
Before Juliana intervened, special approval was required to change vocations within the Crystal Orthodoxy.
Pedir
In
permiso.
this way, the institution grew rich through fat profits they called alms.
Oh, so the Orthodoxy cornered the job market and the fees to participate
Hostia,
therein.
qué huevos.
In layman's terms, yes. But Juliana exposed this fact before the reigning Grand Patriarch. It was then that Juliana approached panicked high officials and the Grand Patriarch himself with a proposal of pure genius. He showed them a stone known as an asterisk, saying the granting of vocation should be based on it, overseen by the Orthodoxy. Those who sought such vocations would apply to the Orthodoxy and pay a fair price. Anyone with the means to pay could thus learn a new job.
Qué raro meter en la historia una mecánica como esa, ¿no? Es como si metieran que en el Final Fantasy 3 consigues trabajos conforme aprendes, conforme liberan los cristales. Es raro, ¿no? Que le dieran justificación.
Hence, they accepted Juliana's proposal without question, even appointing him to the important position of
El 3 es el único juego donde los trabajos los cambias así a... Bueno, no, el 5. El 5 también tiene los trabajos que te dé la gana. Los vas aprendiendo a medida que vas jugando. En el 6 puedes mover un poco el personaje como quieras. 7 de clase fija, el 8 clase. En el 8 no hay clase, pero más o menos por el uso del arma. 9 clase fija. 10 no tengo ni idea. En el 1 empiezas con la clase que sea y te quedas con esa clase. En el 2 no hay clases. El 2 tiene completamente 0 a clases. Tú decides cómo entrenar al personaje. Y 4 clases fijas. 5 y 3 la cambias a voluntad. Libre y libre. Lo cual mola, a mí me parece guay.
They now lie secreted away against the day the Orthodoxy's tyranny or some other impending doom threatens the people. He then hid himself in Juliana Woods until those who knew him reached the end of their natural lives. But that did not take long, for I led the forces of the shadows to ensure their swift demise. I had always believed the Crystal Orthodoxy required not but the crystals, the Vestals, and the faithful. With the institution free of corruption, I returned to my homeland of Eternia after a 700-year absence. Where my family's castle once stood, I built a fortress of ice from whence I have been watching over the Orthodoxy's head temple. Meanwhile, Juliana retired to that land to tend to the Vestals, but you know of that better than I.
Say Juliana.
¡Ah! Ha sido muy abusivo, ¿eh? Ah, la ha encantado a ella misma también. Increíble. A ver, monseñor. Confirma eso. Vale, Lilith. Esto lo tengo, ¿verdad? Esto es... Ah. Oh. Vale, el cuchillo mágico tengo porque sube ataque mágico. Vale. Me quito todo el dinero, pero me lo quito de encima esto ya. Hala. Me toma por culo. Monseñor, Emulación, guardar estado. Estado ahora unas 4, por si acaso se volviera a apagar el ordenador. ¡Ah! ¿En serio? Ya mala suerte, ¿eh? Espérate que me cure antes de entrar. Sí. A ver. Madre mía. Se habrá indigestado. Venga, va. A ver qué tenéis que ofrecer, dolor de roso.
I commend you for making it this far.
Oh, no more paintings?
The final painting lies beyond this throne. I shall reveal it to you if you defeat me in battle.
What?
The last test is a test of strength. I shall only reveal the painting to those whom I deem worthy. One might also say that there is no need for those who are unworthy to lay their eyes upon it. But be forewarned, I am a formidable foe. I trust you are well prepared.
Que sí, hombre, que sí. He guardado, ¿no? Por si acaso, emulación, guardar estado, ahora una 4. A luchar. ¡Hostia! ¡Esa espada! Yo la quiero. ¡Hostia! Es la espada de Finn y Jake, tú. ¡Qué guapa! Antino muertos, ¿eh? Vamos a empezar con defaults. Siempre se empieza con default. Este va a ser inmunísimo a la magia, tú. Ojo, ¿eh? Ha quitado 0, ¿no? Vale, ha quitado 0. Esto es duro, ¿eh? Se podría probar, pero no sé. ¿Qué echamos? A echar sagrada. ¡Hostia! ¡Qué guapo! ¡Oh, madre mía! Vale, tengo mágico 150%. Me ha quitado Brave. Me ha quitado Brave. Hay que aprovechar, ¿eh? Toma un Santos por ahí. No, vas a hacer primero un Santos y luego cura más a todos. Cid va a hacer su movida, que es cólera y diferencial. ¿A qué vas a ser tú débil? No lo sé. A tinieblas, a lo mejor. No, ni de coña. Para. Toma. ¡Hostia! Vale, débil a Santos. Débil a Santos y a Luz. Voy a poner espada mágica de Santos. Uf, qué dolor. Es que él no va a hacer nada. En general le vas a hacer muy poco con esto. Se podría meter una toxina, pero es que no va a funcionar. ¡Hostia! ¡Ah! Ni siquiera le ha quitado mucho. ¿Ha echado un busido? A defender. Podría haber echado un busido, fíjate. ¿Qué tenemos ahora? Ataque mágico. Hay que aprovechar. ¡Ah! ¡Toma! Trajo, que son 9000, ¿eh? Me gusta. Esto le hace mucho daño. Sobrevivido al menos. Podemos invocar a un amigo. ¿Qué me interesa? Ojo, ¿eh? Va. A ver qué hace eso. ¡Bum! 2000. 0. Eso solo daña a los que están heridos. Me tengo que tomar un turbo éter, ¿eh? Entre poco. Voy a tomar un elixir. A ver si llego. No voy a llegar. Antes de que se acabe la canción. Ah, qué mal. Ah, qué poquito, tú. Se me queda uno, tío. Pensaba que tenía más. ¿Será ya el fuego o algo así? ¡Ah! ¡Ostras! Basta ya, ¿eh? Ahí. Se no doy una. Uf, madre mía. Un momento, pesadilla oscura, ¿eso qué hace? Ah, vale. Venga, va. Esto no va a funcionar tampoco, ¿verdad? Cabronazo. Clase de batalla, Claro, pero no está ahí para que le pegue. Pero no me sirve de nada. ¡Oh! ¡Qué paliza! Pa, 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 pa. Podríamos jugárnosla. A ver si puedo hacer esto. Vida o muerte. Artes oscuras, cólera. Artes oscuras, diferencial. Vale. Nos tiramos un tinieblas normal. Y default. Vale, bien. Ah, bueno, pues igualmente iba a morir. Podemos jugar con eso, ¿no? Que de resucitar a ti. A tu casa. No he ganado nada. No, ni un elixir. Asterisco de vampiro. Aso de estadísticas y habilidades a atacar. Depende de habilidades de los monstruos. Dado, varita y bastones. Ah, es un... Meh. Nah. Dagas y varitas.
I am a man of my word. Behold, the final painting.
Quizá Rinabel, entonces.
This painting.
It is the angel descended from the heavens during my final battle against Julian.
Ah, sí, el ángel que decían, que era Nies.
When we last did battle 1800 years ago, the battle raged 100 days. The mountains of Norende rent asunder. Knowing the battle was reaching its end, I mustered the last of my strength to cast my greatest of spells. As my final attack surged forth, the angel did descend from the skies over Norende.
Are you sure it was an angel?
Verily so, for there are no other words to describe her. For a moment, Yuliana and I stood captivated. Before we realized it, our struggle was forgotten. We both tended to the angel. But the angel lost her light. Her wings were shattered and her body torn asunder. There seemed little hope she would live. When she came to her senses, she trembled with fear. Yet with little remaining strength in her body, she made unto us an appeal.
What appeal? What did the angel say to you?
Ere she passed from this world, she slipped in and out of consciousness over many a day. In between ever-growing periods of unconsciousness, it was all she could do to mutter incoherently. A trap most vile, such a fool am I, the warriors of light, if it's not too late. These she would repeat over and over. When she did come to her senses, she would speak of the calamity that had befallen her. She spoke of how Luxembourg was on the brink of doom, and spoke with precision of the events that has heralded its coming. She herself was surprised to find that she knew of details of our past, and events of the future as well. The struggle between the old faith and orthodoxy. The tragedy that would befall my family. My immortality. Even events of the distant future.
The distant future?
Yes. For the angel spoke of events that have not come to pass even now. Events that await you in your future. She told of a bringer of evil who would appear in the guise of one friendly to the Vestals and seduce them into unleashing chaos in the name of awakening the crystals. This evil one would destroy Luxendark by piercing the boundary that protects this world. And the opening of a great rift that sunders the earth shall herald its coming.
The Great Chasm.
The angel told of many other omens here the great chasm would open. The light of earth shall raise up the north, and a deathly plague shall cover all the lands. Then shall a great rift rend the earth. She then entrusted me with a certain task, one that only an immortal such as I could fulfill.
What sort of task could only an immortal fulfill?
That I cannot say, for she swore me to secrecy. But thereupon she quietly passed from this world. For 3 days and 3 nights, my former mortal enemy Yuliana and I spoke of what had transpired. Ultimately, we vowed to join forces to prepare for the coming doom of which the angel had foretold.
Y ya está. Con esto acabamos el episodio del Orden Rosso. Madre mía, qué largo ha sido. Pero bueno, Lord de Rosso no hace usted nada por esto que acaba de pasarme. Me voy a morir. No puede ser que me muera, No puede ser que me muera. Tengo miedo ahora, Que me voy de aquí. ¡No! Es que lo sabía. Es que mira que lo sabía. Que estoy súper debilitado, tú. Que me voy a morir. Y si me muero no sé si cuenta si he derrotado al Lord de Rosso o no. Jolín, con las llamas del infierno, tú. Madre mía, que mal lo estoy pasando ahora, ¡Ah! Venga, va. No es tan difícil, tú. Vámonos de aquí ya mismo. Rinabel, te haces vampiro. Prontamente. Prontamente prefiero a, yo que sé, cuando me apetezca. Para la siguiente habré leveleado un poco. ¡Hala! Toma, Lore, en tu cara. Lo dejamos por aquí, que hoy ha sido largo. Un saludo a todos, hasta la próxima. Adiós.